Welcome to the CUNY Forum, a MetroView special. I'm Professor Ed Rogowski, Director of the CUNY Internship Program in Government and Public Affairs. The Forum is the monthly meeting of the internship program students and faculty to focus on issues of public policy and politics for New Yorkers, New York City, New York State, and the nation. Our mission here at the CUNY Internship Program, through the seminar courses on campus and through the CUNY Forum, is to promote education for the public service and to interest young men and women in careers in the public service. Our panel, as always, is a group of prominent New Yorkers gathered to talk about issues of currency and importance for New York. Let me introduce them to you. Utrice Lead is executive producer and host of Talkback on WBAI. Welcome.
Thank you.
Next to her, Angelo Falcone of the Puerto Rican Legal and Defense Fund's Institute for Puerto Rican Policy. Welcome, Angelo.
Thanks.
And Professor Doug Muzio of the School of Public Affairs at Baruch College, noted ABC analyst on public opinion polls and election results. Welcome all to the CUNY Forum. Doug, I'm going to ask you to start us out by talking about this recent New York City, New York State primary, March 7th, for the presidential designation. That's our first glimpse in what is likely to be a very intense political season from now through November of 2001 with the New York City mayoralty election. What does this begin to tell us about where we're at politically in New York City and New York State, do you think?
We're in the middle of it. Basically, what the primary showed is that George Bush is going to raise money in New York and not run.
Not run here, not run a campaign.
Really. I think the exit poll results, the bottom line is that this is Gore country and Gore's going to win. Signal piece of information in the exit poll was those people who voted for John McCain, who said they'd defect to Gore in the general election, as well as some of Bush's own people defecting. It wouldn't look good. I would doubt very much if he's going to vigorously campaign.
So we don't expect much from the Republican candidate for president in New York State, not that he's actually been crowned as the nominee yet. Right. Both conventions are far off, but both parties already have their nominees, essentially.
Right.
Gore for the Democrats, Bush for the Republicans.
You're going to have a permanent campaign. You're going to have a 7-month general election campaign, and the air war has already started. They're carpet bombing one another already. And then in the New York State primary, I mean, this media market is going to see two of the most vicious political races and most expensive in the Senate races in American history. It's going to be a bloodbath.
The Senate race is the second piece we want to turn to, but let's hold on to the presidential for a minute and ask you, while you're telling us some of the exit poll analysis, what does it tell us about the Democrats, given Gore beating Bradley something like 2-1 here in New York?
See, the problem was that the victory was too widespread, so Gore won among everybody. So it was the data itself is very difficult to project out. I mean, there are isolated pieces of data. Do you support your candidate for what he believes in, et cetera, et cetera? That seems to indicate certain levels of support, but really on the Democratic side, it's much more difficult. Also, you have to remember, Bradley didn't hurt Gore as much as, in a sense, McCain hurt Bush. I think what happened was that Bradley never said anything about Gore that the Republicans wouldn't have said anyway. McCain just blew a hole in the Republican power structure, in one sense, with his analyses of the capture by the right and the establishment governors.
And in response, the Republican governor of New York State, who many people thought was trying to position himself for a possible selection as a vice presidential candidate with Bush, has since the primary election taken some rather bold steps that are uncharacteristic of Republican governors in New York, or at least the Republican Party these days. Reform of the primary process to open it up, gun control measures.
But it's perfectly understandable in a strategic sense, two senses. Number one, if he wants to run for governor, he's laying out a moderate general election agenda. Democrats outnumber Republicans.
Statewide.
It's fairly liberal state, in fact, and he sets himself up. I think on the national level, this is the analysis. He knows George Bush is a loser nationally. George Bush, you don't get a second chance necessarily at a presidential race again, particularly if Bush turns out to be as light as he appears to be. Bush loses. Pataki's positioning himself for a run in 2004 as the presidential candidate. He knows he's not going to name him vice presidential candidate. He brings nothing to the table. They're going to lose New York anyway. What does he bring to the table? Nothing.
Okay.
So, I mean, Pataki's dreaming.
Let's get Utrice and Angelo into this conversation. I ask you, Utrice, how did you see this presidential primary? What about it seemed to register with you, if anything?
Well, it was one of the best primaries that money could buy, and they bought, unbelievable amounts of money spent. But what was more significant than anything to me about this campaign, and still remains significant to me, is that the way in which a large sector of the electorate simply is being ignored, and openly and brazenly and contemptuously ignored. I mean, we had two candidates do a showtime at the Apollo kind of thing, and neither of the candidates addressed the critical and salient issues of the African American community.
Even though this debate was at the Apollo Theater?
At the Apollo. They had many people, selected persons from the Illuminati and the literati and the glitterati and all that. All the other ratis were right there in the audience, but they really are not engaging in the issues that people want addressed. And when they do engage on the issues, it's always in the old stereotypical way. You know, you talk about the economy, it is geared toward blacks, well, we talk about welfare. I mean, come on. The critical issues of the day simply are being ignored. And that's what's common between the Republicans and the Democrats. There's really no great ideological divide that I could discern between the Bush camp and the Gore camp. They're two different wings of the same lumbering bird.
Yet Bradley, as a candidate, tried to make an issue of the importance of America as a nation facing the matter of race. And it seemed to draw little response within the black community. What do you think explains that?
Well, Bradley's concern about race is very interestingly timed. It would have been good if this interest had been sustained and had been identified earlier, say in his Senate years. This belated realization about the importance of race, I credit him with bringing it into the political arena, but it is still being done in a patronizing way. You don't talk to blacks about racism. They're the people at whom racism is directed. They're most often the victims. So to come to the Apollo Theater to convince black people that there's racism in America, it seems, it's hysterical. But
certainly redundant, at least.
It's a hysterical thing. But he needed to have demonstrated this consciousness early in his Senate years. That did not happen, so it is clear, in my view, that it is politically well-timed, this consciousness about race, and it is being used by all sides, really, to woo voters into the different camps. But I think Sam Smith, the great political analyst, has a very strong point about postmodernism. I think we've come to a point in political campaigns where simply the ends justify the means, and hooray for me, the hell with you, is the mantra of the political campaigns these days.
Angelo, as you looked at it, I mean, you do analyses often through your office of how issues break that are of importance to Hispanics in New York and how Hispanic voters respond to candidates. What did you see in this presidential primary?
Well, I don't know. I really had trouble staying awake during most of these debates. It seemed that there was a lot of information being conveyed through the media. A lot of this thing was really super well covered, and you had all that internet stuff, in Spanish and English too. It was kind of cool. But it was really a big, yawn. I mean, you have all these candidates rushing to some center place politically, and as you're saying, it's hard to discern what are the major, kinds of breaking points in terms of, critical issues and who stands for what. You have basically a Democratic Party kind of race where, kind of Gore is going to take it because Bradley's really not getting it together. I mean, he's doing some kind of interesting things with, basketball players and stuff. But in terms of actually, mobilizing, in terms of, really being on message in terms of certain constituencies, he represented some sort of new America, and I'm sitting there going, I don't get it. I don't get what he's talking about. He's mouthing some words that maybe, we wish he would be doing something with. But it all seems like a big, kind of mushy kind of thing where you have supposedly on the right you have Bush being this kindly guy, really softening his positions, even though deep down inside, there's all this right wing anti, everything kind of thing, but he's doing it in Spanish. So and he's going and he's talking to us, to Latinos, and he got a majority of the 40% of the Latino vote or something in Texas, and all this kind of stuff, and and he's not attacking us as immigrants, where contrast to like in '96 where you had almost all the Latino delegates in the Republican Party saying they were going to leave, they were going to walk out because the rhetoric was so high. So that he softened that position. I think McCain also, coming from Arizona, also having some experience with Latino voters, kind of softened the kind of that message from that side. Then on the other side, you have Al Gore, who's carrying Bill's water, and which, quite frankly, for it's mostly smoke and mirrors in terms of Latinos. One point I always try to make is during this is, for example, they if they were so concerned about Latinos, for example, Latino vote, because he speaks Spanish too, then you'd have maybe he'd hire more of us. But there were actually very few Latinos in the federal workforce. I think we were like 12 or 11% of the population, 6% of the people that work for the federal government. And there's some high-placed people here and there. But the fact is, after 2 terms of the Clinton administration, that really says a lot in terms of what their message means. But they're all speaking Spanish. They're all kind of moving to the center. They're all kind of like nice people. We're not getting the same rhetoric we got before. So it's going to work in very different ways. Because last time, last 2 elections, the Republicans were basically, I had this image of Republicans taking Latinos and just saying to the Democrats, going, here, take them, we don't want these people. And this time around, they're saying, oh, no, we want to talk to them. We'll even do commercials in Spanish and all this kind of stuff. But again, it's interesting because even within the Latino community, you do see kind of like a Southern strategy. In other words, they've written off the Latinos in the Northeast and the Midwest as, hey, we're too, immersed in terms of our loyalty to the Democratic Party. So even the Latino strategy is kind of like, let's do the Southwest, let's do the South.
Florida, Texas, maybe California.
So I don't think Bush is going to be doing very much here either, which means that in terms of our politics in the Latino community, it means we can expect Gore to take the Latino vote for granted.
Exactly.
Where we're going to go.
Describing a situation then where the presidential election will look one way in New York, with Bush almost never being here to campaign, visiting to raise money, whereas nationally, do you expect it to be more competitive?
The race?
Yes.
Certainly. Yeah. Certainly. I mean, I think that it could go down to, it's too early, Ed. You know that. In 1988, Mike Dukakis was 17 points up in the polls in the summer of '88. Come on. I don't remember the first Dukakis administration. Anything can happen.
There's nothing to remember.
Really. Ed Muskie was going to be the nominee in '72. Strange things happen. But I see it could be close.
But this raises a question about really what is this process about? It's not about selling a vision of America. It's just simply selling. It's a sales job, and they organize these elaborate machines to deliver a message. They really don't want to know what the voters are thinking. They really don't care. I think this is a really interesting turn that politics has taken, in that the brazenness of not caring is so apparent and palpable. I mean, when people take the attitude, well, I've got enough money so that even if you don't care, I could make another, could energize support in another sector that I could sell. And this is where politics has come. And I think this is why so many people are turned off. They're disgusted, they're fed up, and we're seeing this need for alternatives more and more, because people are saying, look, I'm getting the same snow job from the Republicans as I am from the Democrats. What's the difference?
Right.
So
excuse me.
Go ahead.
Don't misunderstand my characterization of Bush as being endeared to Gore. Gore's got the very problems that you talked about. There's a certain lack of definition. There's no core to the guy. There really is a Clinton-Gore administration to a certain extent when you look into their souls, if you will. I voted for Clinton twice, and I probably vote for him for a third time. But I mean, he's lacking something. I think Gore's got that same thing about him.
No, but
And
I'm
also he
saying that
doesn't
that's
have a thermostat.
manufactured.
And,
These
right.
people start out as I think sub-average people anyway.
Well, I
But-
wouldn't
but-
go
but
that
I
far.
do. I
Oh,
believe that
geez.
no, really, the
We're being
the
highly
field.
irreverent tonight.
I'm
Yes,
being very
yes.
charitable, actually. The field of candidates, to call them average is to pay them a supreme compliment. What is happening is that they have assembled around them an impressive array of people who are able to manufacture them for presentation to a gullible public. And because the American electorate is less and less inclined to investigate what it is they're voting for, and because we are less involved in the process of selection, and we're asked only to be involved in the process of election, we have a really corrupted system. And it smacks of the same kind of contempt as at Tammany Hall at the national level, where politics is simply a matter of who wins, period. Forget why it is they're entering the field. In any event, they're not interested in really elevating the quality of life for people.
Yeah, but,
It's
but
power,
was
raw
that
power.
ever the case?
But if in the
I mean, is it naive to believe that there was this golden age where people acted in self-interest? I mean, Pericles in Athens?
with informed self-interest and with real meaningful participation. That's the model, that's the ideal against which we measure ourselves, and which is where we always come up short in the sense of what kind of an electorate do we have? What kind of attention are they paying? How informed are they? What choices are they making? Are those choices related to their self-interest, to their social interest? Or are they merely the respondents in this big advertising fundraising game? I mean, the Tammany leaders of the turn of the century in urban wards, in urban districts, are now at a national level the pollsters and the campaign consultants, the media people who create the candidates you're talking about and sell them to the rest of us.
Except there was a connection that the machine politicians had with the populace that the current doesn't at all,
Which was you had to
except by means
deliver
of electronic communications.
Right, you had to deliver something ultimately to hold on to the loyalty in your district.
Right,
if
and
you
also,
were,
also there not only was something tangible, but it was immediate. It was done by the boss. The boss went to your wedding, your bar mitzvah, your funeral. So there was an
Gave out turkeys at
right.
Thanksgiving
So there was
and
an
Christmas.
immediacy there that you got something, and there was a real human being, which was an important socializing agent. Even though there's a lot of problem with the machine, in one sense, the modern technicians of elections don't even have the benefits of the machine, if you will. I mean, I'm one of them. And it doesn't have to be unethical. And it's not necessarily destructive of the political system. It can be enlightening and, in fact, ennobling. It often isn't.
Well, I think Chomsky was absolutely right. This is the age of manufactured consent.
Well,
And I think that's what
Well, the thing
politics
is,
has become.
I think to me the issue is down the road is what are the consequences of that? Because at this point, when we talk about FDR and you see the kind of changes that happened in American society and the way government, started being used in a creative way, and then you see the trajectory since then politically, and you see all sorts of projections about the increasing income polarization in this country, the rise of this persistent underclass in the cities. You see things like these tremendous demographic changes. Like every city, major city, is predominantly Black, Latino, Asian in the majority, and then these are precisely the populations that are not being addressed in terms of the politics. What does that mean? What does that mean? Are you going to wind up with an alienated majority in every American city that's saying, look, none of these people or none of these parties are addressing our issues? Is there a possibility for a more independent, alternative kind of politics way of looking? Or will the system, which has so much resources behind it, is so dominant, will it absorb these new populations? And I think we're at a point now where I find it hard to tell which way we're going to go. I get frustrated in the sense that you don't see these issues being addressed even in a minority way, even in terms of having real third party. And when you talk about a third party and you talk about the Reform Party, for example, and then you have, you have someone like Pat Buchanan all of a sudden sitting down with, what's that lady's name from the
Lenora Fulani.
Lenora Fulani.
Yeah.
I'm sitting there going, I'm getting like a headache. I'm saying,
It's hard to make it add up to anything consistent. But the way you've just described it really means that we're in the period of kind of a watershed, a turning point in how American politics is going to develop. That is, if in fact the majority populations in more and more of our cities are Latino and Asian and black, and they are disenfranchised because the major parties are not speaking to their needs and interests, do they gain the consciousness, the recognition that that's the circumstance? Do they mobilize? Do they act against one or another of the major parties? Or does a new movement emerge which translates into
and a lot of this,
party?
I think, has to do with the role of those intermediaries, those black and Latino elected officials, for example, in their role. And certainly, I mean, when you look at the Al Gore campaign, I think it was in September or October last year, he put out a press release, and he had a list of like 500 Latino elected officials who supported him. And I'm looking at this, and he's trying to show he has support in the Latino community, and I'm saying, well, he's got support of the elected officials. That doesn't mean that, and these are all hangers-on people who, they're saying, look, we want to keep whatever sinecures we have, whatever jobs we have. So we're going to go, this is the guy who's going to win. It had nothing to do with a vision in terms of different politics or real changes in terms of the needs of their community. So it's going to be interesting also to see that, because ironically, organizations like ours and others are always fighting to expand representation. We fight around the issue of redistricting. We get more Latino elected officials, more black elected officials, and sometimes you wonder, well, what's the point? Because these people are not really playing a function of mobilizing the community. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in terms of whether they get delegitimized as a result of playing along with the stuff, or whether they in fact can transform in terms of getting people. You talked about gullible people, but in terms of getting more Latinos on board on this boat. Which
I would disagree with that, because at the same time that they are these the major candidates and so forth are ignoring these communities, there is a process that is organized quite scientifically against third parties and third-party possibilities.
Sure.
The election laws are extremely onerous and are designed to exclude. In fact, I really believe that at this point we are at a very dangerous point in terms of national politics, because these constituencies which are growing, the African American, Latino, Asian communities, Chicano communities, and so forth, I see a merging of interests along racial lines and along exclusion, to the point where people will have no choice but to rebel. Because I think that the political parties, the mainstream political parties, both the Republicans and the Democrats, they understand how to play this race game. And their currency, their political currency, is directly linked to the degree to which they achieve success in quashing the political aspirations of this burgeoning new group. And this group, in turn, has no place to go, because the alternatives, the sluices are not opening up for them. So they remain constantly like crabs in a barrel. You can just have your pick at them. And the leadership, I mean, forget it. They are hostages of the party. And they're not likely to come up with healthy alternatives to what is going on in politics.
See, I don't buy it. I don't buy it. I don't buy it.
Let's take your comment, and then I want to move our discussion.
Okay,
Go ahead.
you could.
No, let's have your comment.
I don't buy it. Number one, I think you're forgetting the real resiliency of the capitalist regime to absorb people into the socioeconomic mainstream. Number two, you're talking about.
Where?
Look at the data. It's
What
there.
data? What
the
data?
You look at data, historical data, contemporary data, in terms of per capita increases in income, etc. It is a generator of upward mobility. But wait a minute.
But it's a
The other
wrong
thing-
measure.
Wait,
It's
wait,
a wrong
wait,
measure.
wait,
The
wait,
real
wait.
measure is not income, but assets. You would find that a number of people you think have greater incomes have zero assets.
We have identified an underlying issue in terms of the analysis of American politics broadly, but we want to keep our discussion to New York and New York politics currently. So let me move forward. This is
spoiled
good food for
sport.
thought for all of us.
Oh,
I think
yeah.
that-
Well, listen, thanks. I was getting scared here for a minute.
You're going to have to move over. You're going to have to get into swinging distance over here.
If this is the context of American national politics broadly that we've
Right.
just been debating in part, trying to
Go
describe.
down to the micro level.
Now let's take it. The presidential race is going forth. You've already told us what you think is going to be happening there, certainly in New York. Now we have a race for the United States Senate seat from New York. We have two candidates whose candidacy, the whole campaign is already being described by folks as the clash of the titans. How do you see the New York Senate race? And what about the primary? Does it inform us in any way, the presidential primary,
No.
about what's likely to happen?
No.
Why not?
No, because it doesn't. The data isn't transferable to that race.
Okay.
And to look at the polling now, it's extremely tight. Giuliani's got a lead. He's held that lead. And if I were going to bet the house, I would think that unless the First Lady offers a compelling reason to vote for her, or Giuliani offers the electorate a compelling reason not to vote for him, if you look at the numbers, I don't think they look very good for her.
I want to take a comment from each of you. Our students are lining up with questions ready, so let's go.
I
Angela.
forget them.
No.
Oh, there's a show.
I just said it's a test. It's a test. It's only a test.
They've all been absorbed by capitalism.
And any comment on the Senate race, Angela?
Well, I think it's, to be honest, I think it's a lot more competitive than I assume. I think you're absolutely right, but it is a much. I thought when I heard Hillary Clinton was thinking of running, I said, oh, this guy's going to kill her. And I think she's shown more resiliency than I mean, and listen, I'm ticked off because she made these comments about the Puerto Rican political prisoners. I'm so pissed off at the lady. But the fact is that I think she's the star power she brings, the amount of media she gets, and if she plays her cards right, and if the mayor does like I think he's doing now around, or the
that's a different story.
I think that combination of forces creates a situation where, like I said, I'm surprised at how competitive I think this is.
Beatrice, a comment?
I just can't decide who is the greater postmodernist politician, Hillary or Rudy. They're equally offensive to me.
Okay. With that, let's turn to questions from our students. Tell us your name and your college and place your question, please.
My name is Hillary Bloomfield.
Hillary.
I'm from Queens College.
Vote yes.
My vote is for Hillary Clinton anyway.
Oh, well.
But my question is about when you were discussing about the Parlor Theater and Gore and Bradley that was there, my concern was with the residency there. The people that that were in the studio audience in the Parlor Theater that night, it weren't the people who lived there in the area per se. It was they probably was in the bleachers. Everybody else were politicians, movie stars, things like that. As though the people that really lived there was not important. You came there to talk to the people that lived there. That's what they came for.
We have your comment, but do you have a question?
My question, well, I'm leading up to the question.
Okay.
Is that I don't know why Bradley and Gore, they ignore a lot of different questions that was placed to them about people of color and where they stand at as far as with the gun control and what's going on. They kind of sidestepped that issue about the gun control. How do you all feel about the gun control and how police brutalities that's going on here in New York City, and what can be done about it?
Comments?
Well, I mean, you've got this fascinating case of you're talking about the Senate race. You've got the mayor of the city of New York going after the victim of a police shooting in a way that's absolutely astounding. And you've got the First Lady for the first time really engaging the mayor directly. And then the mayor counterpunching today. It's ugly. And in a sense, it's almost as if the mayor is baiting Sharpton when he comes back after jail that he wants to duke it out. The mayor's looking like he wants a fight. And this may be playing well strategically for him upstate in certain communities. But the question is, does the mayor's combativeness, let alone his divisiveness, but his combativeness, his temperament, is there too much of a good thing with him and that he's going to put the straw on his own back and break it? That's the question.
We
And
can
I think
only
he's
pray.
I think he may be starting to do that. And I don't know if Clinton's the person to provide an electoral alternative, though.
I mean, it is extraordinary that a sitting First Lady of the United States is a candidate for public office. You talked about star
Sure.
power. I mean, her campaign certainly has suffered from the fact that she travels with an entourage of protection that any First Lady would get, and so there is a candidacy which seems distant from the people she's actually trying to reach as a function of who she is at this point in time. And that gives it an unusual cast, to be sure. Let's go to our next question.
Hi, my name is Kelly Gonsalves, and I'm from NYU. And my question relates to the Giuliani and Hillary Clinton, and especially her comment that was said yesterday about Giuliani further dividing the city. And how is that going to affect him and his position in terms of votes of the African American community?
Well, the African American community was never going to vote for Giuliani, so he can piss off that vote all he wants. He's never going to get that vote. He's never going to get...
Colorful language tonight on the CUNY Forum.
Excuse me.
It's all right.
Well, I'm from Brooklyn. What can I tell you? He was never going to get that vote. And if you don't get the vote, you don't reward. The problem with the mayor's actions, and I'll be as temperate as I possibly can be, is that it's just an example of an overwhelming need to fight, it seems. And when he psychologizes with the psychobabble that Mrs. Clinton is projecting, there's almost a Krieg-like quality to the mayor's reactions. And that's if that is real, or can be made to be perceived to be real, then the mayor's in trouble. If he starts looking nutty.
But it's the question of how the media reports it and how his opponent deals with it. To
Right,
turn
but
that
he's
into
driving it. It's not the media. They're not even filtering it. He's doing it himself. He's pushing it.
The thing is, it's worked for him all these years. The question is whether it's reaching a point where people are just going to get sick of it. I think the same thing happened to Ed Koch, quite frankly,
Yeah.
when Dinkins won. I mean, Dinkins was like city clerk, and then
No, he was the
basically
borough president
of Manhattan.
a city clerk.
Previously
But he was city
the
clerk.
Yeah,
city
he
clerk.
was, but I mean,
Yeah,
he was
but
borough president.
what happened was, I think people just got sick of Koch. I mean, and they got sick of the consequences of all the divisiveness. And people said, look, we need somebody who's going to bring people together. And I think that the risk that Rudy has is that he's going to be pushing it at that level where not just Latinos and blacks, but whites are going to say, look, I'm sick of this stuff.
But that's in
you
the
know,
city.
but-
Right,
but-
that's
What
a big
about
difference.
outside?
But I mean,
he
there are
was not
places like
elected.
Rochester. There are other places also. as
Yeah,
well.
not enough.
But
From
Rudolph
his
Giuliani
upbringing.
was never elected because he promised to bring people together. He was elected because he promised to contain the bacteria
Exactly. And
that
that's what
was
he's doing.
polluting New
And
York.
that's what he's doing.
And by that I mean the African Americans and the Latinos principally. And he can't possibly screw up with his constituency by upping the ante. He could only gain favor with them by doing so, by turning up the heat. Because that's the race element here. The race element, and by the way, Hillary is playing this race card too, because she gets this sudden need to talk about police brutality in a black Baptist church in Harlem. Give me a break. I mean, since
Did you
before.
With the Apollo Theater.
I had
appropriate?
expected, for example, last year, in more than a year ago, when the NAACP met with her husband, the co-president, Hillary's co-president, and implored him to take a look at the burgeoning issue of police brutality nationwide, to do something about it by executive order, and to begin to bring the governors together to implement a national plan. Where was her opinion then? This is the issue. These people are fakes, frauds, and phonies to me.
Ooh,
Yeah. I'm from Brooklyn, too.
pretty clear. Our next question, please.
Good evening. My name is Rocky Chin, and I am a student at Queens College in the Workers' Center. My question is, after the primaries at the federal level, at the presidential candidates mentioned education as being an issue that they're going to debate. Particularly George Bush talked about education.
He needs it.
And he needs it.
Yeah.
But I would like you to address, particularly for New York City, being a city which is predominantly now a city which has a large public education system with a diverse student body, and yet we're failing our students. And the students are also demonstrating daily. The faculty are demonstrating for more funds, for more attention. And yet, how is this going to come into the debate in terms of this election? I tend to agree with Utrice Lead in that a lot of this is not being addressed in New York City, but also nationally. So I'd like you to address that and particularly look at maybe how the Senate race is going to talk about these
The issue
issues.
of education in the presidential race and the Senate race. Does it fit? Are we going to hear more about it?
Well, you're going to hear about all these things. You're going to hear about all these things. The problem is not that you're going to hear about discrete issues like education or gun control. Someone mentioned that he felt that the Apollo, that they're like on tightrope. Well, this is kind of super incrementalism, this feeling that, look, ultimately, I think, and all the candidates share this, ultimately, government can't do anything good for you, ultimately, you know, we really can't solve these problems, you know. There's a lot of blacks and Latinos in the school. Maybe they're stupid. You know, there's nothing you could do about it. You know, we'll throw some money in. We'll have a little pilot I mean, you know, I think the president's been great at developing these little pilot programs and these little initiatives. Remember his initiative on race? I forgot about it already, but
So did he.
It's the kind of thing that it's all, like you said, it's a permanent campaign where these guys are not talking about anything of substance. And when it comes down to it, you find that the politics really is not that different. And that's the scary part, that when we talk about a lack of vision, and you can be pragmatic and say, look, this is the best it's going to get. Al Gore is the best you're going to get pragmatically between the two, you know, which you want, which is the lesser of two evils. But the problem is that those kind of basic problems that many poor people in this country face, that our cities face, they're not being, it's all window dressing, empowerment zones, tax breaks for this program, incentives. Not addressing, you know, head on some of these issues. The educational issue is one that, you know, there are all sorts of programs and approaches and, you know, all this kind of stuff.
If I could add, it's not just the lesser of two evils, sometimes it's the evil of two lessers. We have to take a look at what is necessary. And what is necessary is a dramatic re-education of the electorate. You cannot expect anything brilliant from candidates. It is impossible. They're not going to deliver because they genetically are programmed against it. Do not expect them, because their job is a sales job. Would a salesman really tell you that the car he's trying to sell you is a piece of crap? No, it's the greatest thing that you must have it, made just for you. Look at political candidates as snake oil salespeople. They're selling you something that you know in there. You could call it cynicism, but I'm taking a look at what historical references tell me. Don't change them, because they're not going to change. The system is not going to change. What can change, and change all of it, is the behavior of the electorate. The electorate continues to act as if it is a powerless, gelatinous mass, that it has to go along with whatever the program is. You know, like Gore is the best we're going to get. Well, if that's the best we're going to get, dump him. Say no, thanks.
I think that's too sweeping in the sense that
I think it's very
it doesn't
important.
give any alternatives. I think it is a combination of
something.
Leadership and those kind of mass
No, the
movements
electorate-
together. It's not.
The leadership is not going to do. The leadership is in bed with all of the forces that are stymieing political choice. That's my view.
Too simplistic.
It's not simplistic.
I think it is.
It is a very sophisticated
Oh,
analysis.
no. It can be simplistic and sophisticated.
No, what is going on is that the electorate, and this is why there has been this consistent dumbing down of the electorate. The electorate does not know what political choices it has. It does not
want to know.
It does not as it doesn't want to know.
No, but that's the fundamental difference. Your presumption is that you've got this hungry mass of political animals out there who want to be informed and be democratic citizens in the Platonic Republic, and it's bull.
But in point
that
of
never
fact-
happened, and people don't want it.
But in
they
point
don't
of
want
fact-
That's not
it.
true.
They don't want it.
We have had.
What explains the low participation rates? Obviously, they don't want it. Somehow
May
they're being
I
convinced.
say 2 words to you?
Sure.
3 words.
Oh.
Fannie Lou Hamer.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
I thought you were going to say something else.
No, that's 2 words. That's 2 words.
Fannie Lou Hamer. Now here is a woman, a sharecropper, who knew intuitively that there had to be a different choice. And her choice from the word go was none of the above. Now, you're going to have to take some kind of leadership in order to change the behavior of the party. Forget about these people taking it up on their own and say, we've been terrible, we've changed.
No, what I'm saying
That's
is
what
not
I'm
only
saying.
is it not going to be leadership, but you're misperceiving the wants, needs, and interests of your democratic mass out there.
May I, for example, in this last primary, did people know who went to the polls like lemmings to pull a lever for this one or that one? Did any of the electorate know they could actually write in a candidate?
The question is, did they want to know?
Is there
It's
anything
It's not
in
did
the
they
ballot?
want to know, did they know?
Is there anything in the
No.
ballot makeup that facilitates it? And the answer is no. It's very
would they write in?
inconvenient to try and do that.
Not it's convenient, it happens to be the law. You are supposed to be able to do that.
Yes.
But the system is organized so that you will not do that, and therefore an effort by many people in the city to urge a write-in of Amadou Diallo as a protest vote didn't get that campaign off the ground, although it was a legitimate political message that should have been sent to the Democratic
Yeah,
Party.
but,
Why-
then, but
why
now you're
we-
arguing that there were structural barriers, and before it was simply changing behavior. Now we're removing systemic obstacles.
If enough,
What
what
is
would
it?
happen
Let
if
us-
enough
Go
people?
ahead, stop.
Let us
One
into-
Well,
last
we need
question.
we need
What would
students.
happen?
Students.
Yeah, sorry,
Students.
all right.
We want to know our
Okay.
students. Please, your question.
My name's Ken LeBeau. I'm from College of Staten Island.
Yes.
And I want to say, Utrice, where have you been all my life?
Oh,
Better than what I told you.
I think
That's
she's
great.
out right on the ball.
This is not the
This isn't the dating game.
Now
She-
it is.
I think she's right on the ball. The two worst problems with our country and the city of New York are the Democrats and the Republicans. If you wanted to run and you had ideas and you believed in a certain way that you could run the school system successfully, and you had some tax reform and you had some real ideas that were solid and you were middle class and you had an independent point of view. There's no way, unless you pander to the Democrats or the Republicans, that you can get your voice heard. If you wanted to run as an independent and get your name on the ballot, they make this nice, convenient little rule. You have to get 15,000 registered voters in 16 different districts, and they make it ridiculous. It's impossible for a working class individual to man a campaign such as that unless you are rich. And I'm
your
sorry.
question is?
And well, my question is
Don't do questions.
how do you suggest we get people, the electorate, interested again? Because they're not interested. They're ready for a soundbite.
If
They're ready
one of
for
the
the
problems, if one of the problems is an electorate that has become disinterested in politics and turned off to it, and where the structure of the political game is intended to reduce their participation, their awareness, and therefore their participation, how do you alter that? Is this a long-term investment in the political re-education of a citizenry and their children? I mean, and how do you begin to measure even the impact of what you do? Because you have elections every 2 years, every 4 years. The cohorts in the electorate change as people age out, as new people become eligible to vote. How can you begin to address this issue? I mean, this is
Massive civic education. Well, what you're talking about is the turn of the century progressives, essentially. Massive civic education.
that's what it took 100 years ago to create.
I'm not saying that that's the answer, but that was an historic
But that
answer.
that was a movement 100 years ago to create a mass electorate for what was becoming a mass democracy.
Right.
And the trouble with a good deal of the debate about the quality of American politics is it's still based on a vision of the time when the Constitution was adopted and the nation was created, when all of our people were not citizens. To be sure, they were white men of property over the age of 21. They didn't include women. They certainly didn't include people of color who were, in fact, acknowledged to be only 3/5 of a person for the sake of population count
I think
as
that
slaves.
the
So-
electorate has to learn to misbehave and become extremely unpredictable. Right now, as teed off as Latinos are and as African Americans are, we're still predictable. We will grumble, we will fuss, we will fight, but we'll vote Democratic. We have not yet learned to punish very severely the people who betray our interests. And another thing that has happened is that the electorate, and this goes across the board, the electorate simply does not know. It's not that it's turned off. It just doesn't know that there are alternatives available. So maybe the conditions themselves will produce a rebellion.
Well, it's like for example, the surprise vote for Al Sharpton when he ran for the Senate.
Yeah.
People started saying, wait a minute, there's something going on in the black community, the black churches, these networks here that we never mobilized, that were ignored, that all of a sudden started delivering. The fact that you had, was it 50,000 Haitians around the 8th thing marching over the, what the hell happened there? I thought these were people that weren't organized, that, you know, all they did was have these little festivals and stuff like that. And what's going on? There are elements, networks out there that haven't been energized, haven't been moved. I think it's a complex process. It's one of, yes, increasing this affection by greater and greater numbers of people, but not enough. You know, most major social movements, you know, in this century, the last century, revolve around a middle class that feels like it's not getting what it's supposed to be getting. You know, that whole J-curve business, you know, people having rising expectations and then being dashed. So it's not a simple kind of process where it's just the downtrodden, the poorest of the poor get mobilized. It's really the issue of a leadership emerging that is an alternative leadership, an alternative way of organizing. I mean, I could see a scenario where as the major cities in this country become blacker, more like browner, more yellow, that you begin to start having a real problem in terms of those. I mean, when you have 70, 80% of maybe New York City being saying, you know, none of these people are addressing our issues. Well, then what are the alternatives in terms of organizing, in terms of a new leadership? There's a lot of emerging black, Latino leadership that I see that just gets killed. The media, I mean, look what's happening with Al Sharpton. I think he's a great case in point because everybody, all the media said this guy's terrible, but they can't, you know, it's like you know, eating chocolate or something. You know, let's cover him. And now he even became, and he's so proud of it. I saw him on New York One. He's become an object for national politics. I mean, they're using him as a symbol nationally.
Positively and negatively.
And the thing that's interesting is what the hell is Al Sharpton still doing with all these people against him, still being a factor politically, a major factor and a national one?
Because he has not yet crossed, and this is one of the things we learned from, I think, one of the most potent political messages that was sent to the mainstream in recent years was the Rainbow Coalition, which was scuttled by Jesse Jackson. It was an extraordinary attempt to put a coalition of people who had been penned in by the historical obstacles to working together, but they came together and formed an extraordinary insurgency. Unfortunately, that very leadership was used to undermine the struggle. And we're seeing this potential coming up in this new struggle being so personalized in Al Sharpton, because they will then pressure him to dismantle this burgeoning political power. So I would not say that there's no hope at all. I would say that there is a great deal of hope. The electorate has to misbehave, it has to become unpredictable, and it has to be ruthless with its leadership. Cancel their contracts publicly the minute they mess up, and find new leadership that's credible.
Next question.
Hello, my name is Helena Edwards. I'm from John Jay College. I love Miss Freed, I must say that. It's clear from, you know, Hillary Clinton's coming to New York and having, you know, people having to teach her the issues, New Yorkers' issues, that she, neither her nor Giuliani is the right candidate. However, I think the fact that the election, the candidacy is based on who can raise the most money, you know, so they select somebody like her who has that national pull to raise a large sum of money to compete with Giuliani. Would you support a system where maybe, say, the government set, you know, limits, and maybe government funds are used, and maybe the TV station offer free, you know, advertisement to these candidates to try to keep the money, you know, the large money influence out,
reduce the influence of money in our
and bring in a more wider margin sector of candidates?
Comment?
It'll have a marginal impact. I mean, the bottom line is that the people who exercise power are going to exercise power systemically. I agree with you that might mitigate it on the margins, but the fundamental thrust of the system is going to operate in a very similar way.
One analyst talked about money as the mother's milk of politics.
Right, Willie Brown.
And it seems that no matter what kind of campaign finance reform we attempt, although we'll have another test of it here in New York in the municipal elections in 2001, that moneyed interests find a way, find some loophole in the system, some point that they can penetrate. If we regulate hard money, then there's this category of soft money, and it takes us another decade to address that, by which time soft money is figure out where it's going to go when we outlaw soft money and so on. And so it's an amazing resource in our politics, and it's hard to curtail its influence.
But it's possible. That's
Yes.
there are, like I said, there are networks, there are resources in supposedly very poor communities that we haven't found ways of energizing that are there that can counter a lot of this stuff. Again, Sharpton's a good example as well. I mean, when he ran, he didn't have much money,
That's
and
right.
he did well, and that's at the strength in terms of the African American community and things that, again, were supposedly hidden strengths. But I think the problem is when we start talking about this stuff is that, and I agree with you, it's got to get messier and it's got to get more unpredictable, and there's got to be an electorate out there that begins to act in very different ways for possibilities to open up. And again, it's a complex process. It just doesn't go from the bottom up. It is also one where elites have to start getting insecure about, oh shit, I don't know what the hell's going on here, What the heck's going on
And
here?
perhaps I feel threatened.
I have to start looking for some new leaders, or I have to start making different kinds of alignments. And that's not going on now. That's really not going on now. And so some of these are kind of these broader social political processes that we really sometimes don't know when they're going to happen. Some of it is, I think, within communities of color, among poor communities, there has to be a different kind of organizing supported, different kinds of issues, different kinds of ways of organizing ourselves. Because I think the biggest problem we have is we have these elected officials, and they are captives, and they're creations of the existing political structure, and that's who they respond to.
Having created the right to vote and having supported it, at least in some ways over time, the capacity to mobilize numbers against the influence of special resources like an excessive amount of money has proven to be one way you can do it. If you bring numbers to the polls, you can beat money.
Well, here's the problem.
It's not only to the polls,
I mean,
too.
we're talking about Hillary Clinton. I don't recall a primary producing Hillary Clinton as a candidate.
It was an agreement.
This is what I mean.
Yes.
So why are we even pretending
Primaries
that
happen,
this is a democratic process?
Primaries happen when
know?
when candidates file for them.
It's money.
Yes, and the ability to raise money to create the candidacy. But if you can mobilize numbers, you may be able to
That's
do
a good.
the same.
The Hillary Clinton campaign is a good example how this thing works, because to a lot of people, to be honest, a lot of New Yorkers, damn thing didn't make any sense when it came up. I mean, a lot of people had to swallow hard, had to say, well, how, and then you had the these people in the Democratic Party here having to come up with these convoluted reasons why this makes sense. But it's like, if you have power, you can make things happen, even if it doesn't make sense to a lot of us. And that's the point where, poor people have to get to the point where, hey,
It's not about making sense. It's just so undemocratic. The Democratic candidate acting so undemocratically and having it sanctioned, that's insane.
But primaries
That's insane.
happen.
That's
Primaries
American
happen
politics.
when more than one person wants the nomination of his or her party. In this case, it may be that her prominence, her power, has convinced others not to challenge her. But we're still in a time period. There will be a September primary here in New York. We can have a primary in either of the major parties for the choice of a Senate nominee. It is still possible if one mobilizes. It becomes increasingly unlikely, so it seems to be sure.
Look, you know what the word is. The word went out to all Democrats. If you challenge Hillary, you're dead.
While her
Oh, yeah,
husband
well,
sits as
Willie-
the president, I
Willie
would
Colon,
would be a courageous act.
Literally or figuratively.
Willie Colon is taking them on. So he plans to take her on from Mexico. I don't know if you heard Willie Colon, the Salcero, announced that he's going to take her on. The only problem is, he's residing now in Mexico, just to give you a sense of how nuts this stuff is.
In the 2 minutes we have remaining, I want to ask each of you for one short comment about the future of our politics in the near term, in terms of what happens here in New York. Doug?
No clue. Really. Very unpredictable. Expect things that you don't expect to happen. But at the same time, I think let me just say, I think the mayor's race could be the most interesting race. That's the race we didn't discuss, with the interplay of race, class, geography. I think it's
Because
going to
it's
make a
all
dramatic
about
difference.
New York City
It's
and all the
about New York
diversity and the
City.
complexity
Exactly.
within the city.
Exactly.
Angela?
Yeah, I think there are all sorts of interesting opportunities for some, different things to happen. I think the mayoral race is one because there's definitely going to be a change in parties. It's going to be interesting how that's going to be defined, who's going to, what the points of contention is going to be. You have term limits where you're going to have the city council totally in flux. So there are possibilities for at least glimpses of a possibility of kind of like an alternative kind of politics.
Local
So we'll
politics.
see, but it's a long-term process. I think what we're going to see is more what I like to call messiness, political messiness. And from my point of view, and I think the point of view of the Latino community, messiness in politics is actually a very good thing for us.
Utrice, 30 seconds.
I think it's a great time for people to get into grassroots political organizing and coalition building, and within all the dismal stuff that is happening, a fantastic opportunity exists to do just that.
I want to thank the panelists for joining us this evening. This has been a sometimes messy discussion of the complexities of New York politics, from the presidential to the senatorial levels, and looking ahead to next year's mayoral race, which we didn't have the time to get into in great depth. New York politics remains a fascinating as well as a complex enterprise. For sharing your expertise with us on behalf of the students and faculty of the CUNY Internship Program, we thank you, and thank you.